Hér kominn John Perkins, hann kominn hérna út af mynd sem heitir Draumalandið, sem gerð eftir bók Andra Snæs Magnasonar. Þetta heimildamynd og hugvekja. Ég sá þessa mynd í gær og forsýningu og ég bara mæli sterklega með henni. Ég meina, menn eru kannski ekki saman allt sem kemur fram í henni, en hún er áhrifarík og á eftir að vekja miklar umræður. Eins og ég sagði áðan, þá verður þetta viðtal textað í kvöld í endursýningunni og svo líka á vefnum. John Perkins, welcome to Silver Ales. You are here for this film, Dreamland. I'd just like to ask you, what was your part in this film?
Well, a film crew came to my house in the United States and interviewed me, and as I'd been watching what was going on in Iceland, I was very struck by the fact that it seemed to me that Iceland was one of the first countries to be hit by economic hitmen, but people who were doing today to Iceland what I had done in former times to places like Indonesia and Iran and many of the South American countries, African countries all over the world, to what we call the developing world. Suddenly a developed country, Iceland, is being hit, and it seemed to me that it was sort of an experiment in this process of how do we hit the developed countries now.
I have here two of your books. Confessions of an Economic Hitman was a multi-million bestseller. I would just ask you to explain what is an economic hitman?
Well, I think it's fair to say that we economic hitmen have managed to create the world's first truly global empire. It's a secret empire because it hasn't been created by armies, people aren't aware of it. It's been created by economic hitmen. And the way we work is many different ways, but perhaps the most common is to identify a country that has resources that our corporations covet, like oil or here in Iceland, cheap energy. Then we arrange huge loans to that country. But the money doesn't actually go to the country. It goes to our own corporations to build big infrastructure projects in that country, hydroelectric dams or highways or big factory complexes. And yet the people of the country don't really benefit for the most part. A few wealthy people may benefit, or certain politicians who have arranged this may end up getting big jobs with the companies that come in. For example, in Iceland would be with the aluminum companies probably.
Yes.
But the people are left holding a huge debt, and it's such a big debt that you can't possibly repay it. So at that point, we feel that we have you. You know, we say you can't pay your debt, so give us a pound of flesh. Sell your energy resources real cheaply to us, or privatize your banking system and sell it to foreign organizations, to our companies, or send troops in support of ours to someplace in the world like Iraq, or vote with us on the next critical United Nations vote. And in this way, we've really managed to create this empire in a very, very subtle way. So in fact, you become part of the empire, but it isn't as though you're occupied by military forces. You're occupied by economic forces, in essence, by debt.
Well, Iceland is heavily in debt now.
For sure.
More so than most other countries.
Yes.
So it's mostly about resources. It's all about resources.
It's all about resources and control of populations, because that's how you get to control resources. When populations stand up to you, as a number of Latin American countries are doing today, you begin to lose the ability to control the resources. So it's about the resources, yes, but in the process it's also about controlling people so you can get at those resources.
A word you used is corporatocracy.
Correct, corporatocracy. Right?
Yes, it's a mouthful. Can you define that for me?
Well, you know, I think we have to ask ourselves if there's a modern empire, it's an economic empire, who's the emperor? And an emperor is not elected, doesn't serve a limited term, and reports to no one. Presidents, for example, of the United States, don't satisfy that definition. But what we really have is this group of people who run our biggest corporations. Now, this is not a conspiracy theory. These people don't have to come together to conspire to do anything illegal. But they do, in fact, control most of the politics around the world. Yes. And they control most of the media around the world. You know, through most of my lifetime, we'd look at the geopolitics as you got a globe with 180 some odd countries, of which a few are very powerful. The United States, the United Kingdom, the Soviet Union at various times. But today you might better look at the geopolitics of the planet as being still 180 countries, but you've got these huge clouds swirling around the planet that know no borders, don't respect any particular set of laws. These are the big corporations. And they'll strike deals in Iceland, they'll strike deals with the Chinese and the Taiwanese and the Tibetans, they'll strike deals with the Israelis and the Arab nations, with whoever they need to gain control of resources. So we're at a time in history that's like when the city-states became nations, except now the nations are losing their importance, and the big corporations are taking over the multinationals.
Many of them are larger than medium-sized states or even fairly large states.
Absolutely. Of the 100 economies the 100 largest economies in the world, over 50 of them are big corporations.
You have called this a vicious empire. Is it vicious?
Yes, I think it's very vicious. It's vicious in a different way from past empires that could be extremely vicious militarily. This empire is vicious economically. So it keeps people below the poverty level intentionally in many places because that serves its interests best. People starve because of this empire. AIDS spreads because of this empire. This empire really has very little compassion. In fact, it sees poverty as a way of controlling resources and controlling people. That's very, very vicious.
Yeah. In a different book, I'm sure you've read it, the corporations are described as being, not only are they not moral, but they are described as sociopaths or sociopathic.
Well, it's interesting. I think one of the things we can look at is why are executives, CEOs of some of the biggest corporations in the world paid so much? And one of the reasons is it's very hard to find people that are able to do those jobs. Because in fact, those jobs do require sociopathic people, people that have no compassion for anyone else, people that are willing to go out into the world and do extremely awful things to people. Yeah. And I think you have to pay people a lot to take those positions. Having said that, I'd also like to say that I have great hope that this is an empire that we can turn around, because it isn't a military empire, and that the majority of executives that I know, excluding those CEOs at the very top of the biggest corporations who I think are sociopaths, but other than those, we've got a lot of executives that are human beings like you and me. They have children, they want to have grandchildren, or they have grandchildren, and they don't want to see the world destroyed. They would like to see a better world. Yes. And we, the people, really need to pressure them to do something different.
But we are looking at the third world, which is being really plundered by these corporations. They are the poor people, the mass of people are not enjoying the benefits of
correct.
What is happening? No.
Well, that is correct, but we're seeing a revolution in Latin America, for example, where 10 countries representing more than 80% of the population of South America have recently, within the last few years, democratically and peacefully voted in presidents who are saying no more of this. We're not going to be servants to the IMF anymore. We're not going to sell our resources basically to the lowest bidder. Bolivia is saying, the profits from Bolivia's gas have to go to help Bolivia's people, and Ecuador is saying the profits from Ecuador's oil have to help Ecuador's people. These presidents, Correa of Ecuador and Morales of Bolivia, and the other 8 presidents in these categories, 2 of which are women, like in your country, we've got Argentina and Chile with these women presidents. They're saying no more of this. We're going to stand up to this. And during most of my lifetime, every one of these countries was controlled by a series of brutal dictators. But that's all changed. So there is a revolution coming about. There are social movements around the world that are beginning to understand. And I think what's exciting about Iceland is that you have an extremely educated population here. Yeah. Programs like yours are helping to educate people. If the Icelandic people can truly see what's going on, you can be a leader in turning this whole thing around. And that's why I'm here in Iceland, because I hope that'll happen.
But basically now the IMF is running Iceland, is running the show here after the collapse. But you have a governor from the IMF.
Yeah, but you don't have to allow that to happen any more than the Latin American countries.
You are very skeptical of the IMF, are you?
Extremely. It's a brutal organization, and the recent G20 conference last week, sort of is an attempt to bring the IMF back. That's part of what happened there. The IMF was basically going into extreme decline. Nobody was paying much attention. All these countries were rebelling against it. But at the G20 conference, it got this huge boost as part of this $1 trillion investment of all these countries. But we don't have to put up with that, you know. And let me say this, I think an organization like an IMF could be a good organization. You know, you could use that money, but the culture within the IMF today is one that comes from this background of exploitation, of taking control of people and economies for very selfish reasons to serve this secret empire, if you want to call it that.
So we should beware of with the IMF.
Absolutely.
Should we kick them out?
Send it packing.
Send it packing.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, or, you know, send it packing. And because in every case where countries have gone along with IMF policies, it's caused tremendous disruption. Back in the Asian economic crisis in the late 1990s, for example, those countries that bought into the IMF all had terrible financial problems. Those ones that refused the IMF programs did quite well.
In a way, we are so debt-ridden in this country that we should be easy prey for these forces with our
well, you know,
debts.
we in the United States are very debt-ridden too. We're the biggest debtor country in the world today, and yet we're not buying into the IMF type of policies. It's interesting that the very people like Larry Summers and Paul Volcker and ones who are advisors to the Obama administration today, when they were advising the World Bank or the Federal Reserve and so on, and they were going into the developing countries, they were telling them to do exactly the opposite of what they're now telling the United States we must do. And what they're telling the United States we must do is very different from what the IMF is telling Iceland that you must do. So don't listen to the IMF.
No.
I spent many years working with the IMF and the World Bank, and it was all a subterfuge to gain more control, more power over the country's resources, and that's exactly what I'm sure is happening here.
Our resources are energy, and there has been a huge buildup of aluminium factories, and many politicians, many people sort of envisage the future of this country as being one of the largest aluminium manufacturers in the world. What do you think about this?
Well, let me ask you, do you own an aluminum company yourself?
No, I do not.
Do any Icelandic people own aluminum companies?
No, they're owned by Alcoa. And
well, there's your answer.
Yeah.
Do you really want other people, other countries and companies from other parts of the world controlling your resources and your economy? I don't think so. You know, yes, you have tremendous energy resources here, but there's many ways you could use that. For example, this heat, you could undoubtedly grow a lot more crops year-round in big greenhouses, et cetera, and ship them out to the rest of the world. There's a starving world out there. There's a world that's starving for energy. Today, we don't really have a very good means for storing energy. It's produced and shipping it to other places, but maybe some of your entrepreneurs could come up with that. I think there's tremendous opportunities in this computer age, in this age where everybody in the world is communicating with everyone else through cell phones and the internet. I think Iceland can use those energy resources in much better ways than selling them extremely cheaply. And I understand that's what's happening here. Yeah. That companies like Alcoa are getting an extremely good deal. And as I understand, the people of Iceland don't even know how much Alcoa is paying for that energy. Oh. But so I think there's many alternatives, and you should explore those, because to have people from other countries controlling your resources is not a good deal.
So you think that letting these corporations into the country is a mistake?
Well, they're here. What's here is here, and you may not be able to reverse that process, but I think in the future you ought to very seriously consider how you can use those resources to truly benefit Icelandic people, creating your own corporations here, having your people create corporations, and use that energy to help your own people.
The Confessions of an Economic Hitman, it's a book full of strange characters, of greed and corruption and crime. Some people would say that these are wild tales. Are they?
Well, they're all true.
They're all true.
They're all true. They may be wild, but they're all true. Yeah, I wish they weren't true, but unfortunately, that's the way the world goes. And in fact, everybody, all the major characters in the book are historical characters that anybody can do research on, whether it's Robert McNamara, president of the World Bank, or the Shah of Iran, or Omar Torrijos, or Jaime Roldos of Ecuador. I mean, these people are all of the record, so sure.
So do you think really that Iceland was hit by this this type of people, economic hitmen?
Every indication is that you have been. It's a slightly different breed from what I was doing in the developing world, but it's a very similar approach. Yes, it certainly appears that way to me. I have no doubt about it. And in fact, the United States is also being hit by people like this in a slightly different way too. The economic hitmen are more sophisticated today than they were in the 70s when I was one of them.
Yes.
But the basic approach is the same.
Yeah. But it's also a history of, like in your other book, The Secret History of the American Empire, it's a history of imperial conquest of Iraq or Guatemala, different countries where the U.S. was forwarding its interests.
Well, you know, and I mean, I was there. I was in the trenches. I lived that life. I saw it very much from the inside. I'm also a trained economist. I could understand it from an economic standpoint. But, you know, what we see is that when the economic hitmen fail, and I mentioned the scenario of the way we work, when we fail, which isn't too often, but then what we call the jackals go in, and these are people that will either overthrow governments or assassinate their leaders. So when I was unable to bring Jaime Roldos, the president of Ecuador, around, he would not accept these loans for his country. And Omar Torrijos of Panama, they were assassinated by CIA-sponsored jackals. And, you know, that's, both of those cases, they went down in these small plane crashes that there's no question for people that were on the scene of how that happened.
Yeah.
And on the few instances when the jackals also fail, then the military goes in, which is what happened in places like Iraq.
Yes. So this is a brutal history.
It's a very brutal history. It's an extremely brutal history. And, of course, the leaders of every country that are involved in this have to be aware that there are brutal people in the background. If they don't cooperate with the system, there's a risk there. That's why it has to really come from the people. We can't expect the leaders of countries, including the United States. Barack Obama has to be concerned. He has to be aware that there are menacing people there. He has to be very careful. It's got to come from the people.
Yes.
You know, in our own history of the United States, we know that, for example, slavery didn't end because Abraham Lincoln found himself in the White House. Slavery ended because the people wanted it to end, and so they put Abraham Lincoln in the White House. We didn't get out of Vietnam because Richard Nixon was anti-war. He was not. We got out of Vietnam because the people insisted, and Richard Nixon finally saw that he basically had no choice. Always it comes from the people. We can't look to our leaders to have the kind of courage or even the ability to force change unless we, the people, insist upon it. So here in Iceland, you, the people, have to insist that your resources belong to you. This is your land. You live on it. Your ancestors for hundreds of years have been here on this land, taking care of it. And now you must not sell your resources off to others and allow yourselves to be exploited this way. But it's got to come from you. You know, you can elect presidents, prime ministers, but in the end, you have to be the ones to really insist on this and unite behind your political leaders. We have to do the same thing in the United States. And so far, we're not doing a very good job at it. We have a new president, but the people aren't really getting strongly behind him at this point. I hope that changes. Do
you think the current crisis will change the situation in any way? That it will be a wake-up call, or
definitely it is a wake-up call. I've been traveling around the United States and Latin America, talking ever since Confessions came out in late 2004. Almost, you know, for a long time I've been speaking at universities, at MBA programs, to people in the general public, and I've seen a tremendous change in attitude in the past 4 years. People are becoming more aware. There's a lot of movies out like Syriana and Hotel Rwanda and Blood Diamond and
Zeitgeist. You were in Zeitgeist too.
Yes. Yeah. So there's a lot of information that's getting out there. This Dreamland, the movie that's coming out here. I mean, there's so much going on in the world now that are exposing this. I think people are becoming more conscious. Now we have to have the courage to not just be conscious, but also take actions and defend what's rightfully ours. This land is yours.
John Perkins, thank you very much for being on the program. Þetta verður sýnt með texta hér í kvöld og verður svo texta líka á netinu en eins fljótt og hægt Ég þakka ykkur fyrir að horfa í dag. Það engin þáttur á páskadag, þá smá frí en ég tek aftur til óspilltra málanna sunnudaginn eftir páska. Takk fyrir að horfa.